everybody. Let's do a round of introductions. Nancy Wise, Commissioner and Chair.
Pat Malone, Commissioner and Vice Chair.
Suzanne Ogerow, Commissioner.
Good morning, Chip Murphy, County Administrator.
James Crony, County Council.
And we'll go to the room for introductions, and then next we'll go online for introductions. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to introduce themselves? All right, those online hear us now. I see a thumbs up. Okay, so we just did a round of introductions for us at the dais, everyone in the audience, and we will now move to introductions online. Oh, we cannot hear you, Sheriff.
He said, of course you can. Okay.
Commissioner Ogerow is very good at reading lips, apparently, so we'll just do that. Is anyone else online who would like to introduce themselves?
Good morning, Chair Wise. This is Darren Nichols, Director of Community Development for Benton County.
Good morning. This is Daniel Reddick, Solid Waste and Water Quality Program Coordinator with Benton County.
Anyone else? All right.
I can try again.
Ooh, hey, there we go.
Hey, yeah, Jeff Van Arsdale, Benton County Sheriff. Appreciate your patience. I think everybody knows I'm technologically challenged.
You know, we all are these days, so that's okay. All right, we will move to announcements. I do not believe that there are any announcements. We will review and approve the agenda. Any changes to the agenda? Hearing none, I will consider that approved. And we will move to comments from the public. Those wishing to provide public comment can have up to 3 minutes. I will ask for those in the room first. Is there anyone in the room who would like to provide public comment? Seeing and hearing none. Is there anyone online who would like to provide public comment? I see Debbie Palmer would like to. Debbie, go ahead, unmute yourself, and you can have up to 3 minutes.
Okay, hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
All righty. Hello again, dear commissioners. Much to your relief, I'm sure, I am not here to talk to you this morning about the landfill. I am here to talk to you about Chintimony Wildlife Center. So in last week's paper, there was a front page story that talked about how this amazing place, the only all species wildlife rehabilitation center between Salem and Eugene, is suffering from a severe decrease in donations, severe as in down 90%, thanks to the twin bugaboos of COVID and inflation. That 90% decrease in donations translated to a devastating 256% decline in net revenue, but no decrease in animal intakes, for example. In that article, I read that Chintimony serves 5 counties: Benton, Lane, Polk, and Marion. So the article got me to thinking, what if the 5 counties it services joins forces to pledge a sort of universal basic income for their operations? It would probably be a drop in the bucket as far as your respective county budgets are concerned, yet think of how impactful that support would be for this remarkable resource we all take for granted. Anyway, I just wanted to plant that bug in your collective ears. I think it would be something you could do easily. Contact your cohorts in Lane, Polk, and Marion counties, line up a plan, share the costs. Split 5 ways, I can't imagine it would be more than a blip in Benton County's overall budget, yet think of the positive impact you could make. I'm not sure how you would go about doing this sort of thing, but I expect you know. You manage the county's budget after all, and probably know who in the other counties manages their budgets. Anyway, in conclusion, I hope you will give this idea a serious thought, and sooner rather than later, so we don't lose this amazing place. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Debbie. Is there anyone else online who would like to provide public comment? Hearing and seeing none, we will move into our work session. First item, 4.1, discussion regarding amending Benton County Code, Chapter 2 to replace the contract appeal process. And with us, we have Gary Stockoff, the Director of Public Works. Welcome.
Thank you, Commissioners. Good morning. I'm here today to propose an amendment to the codes. This resulted from last summer's protest on a award for a consulting contract where one of the proposed bidders or proposers actually filed a protest, an appeal with the county, and the way the code was or is written now is that it goes directly to the board for a public hearing. Now, the staff can try to work with them and explain and maybe have them withdraw that, but if they don't, it goes to a public hearing into the board, which we had, I think, in early October, if I remember right. In that time frame, I talked to Vance and we agreed that it was probably best going forward that we not have items come directly to the board as a public hearing, and that the proposed language you see today to modify Chapter 2, that part of the code, brings it to the contracting agent, which could be somebody in health or whoever it might be. And then from there, it would be Mr. Kirby. And after Mr. Kirby, it ends. That's it. And that's pretty consistent with how other agencies handle the appeals for these proposals or for bid proposals like that. So that's what we are recommending. The language that we have written as provided in your packet. I think Vance prepared the ordinance, and we would appreciate, discuss it today, but it would be a public hearing, I believe, Vance, on the 6th. First reading and the second reading would be scheduled for the 20th. It's a little bit of timeliness too, because we have a big CMGC proposal coming forward that will be ready to be awarded January 20th. And based on the current schedule, this would become effective the 19th. So that we would like to have that in place for the CMGC proposal. With that, I turn it to Vance for other comments.
So just for a little context, the current mechanism for processing appeals is what Benton County codified back in 1985. It has not changed in 37 years. Our way of doing business has changed dramatically. We've just gotten bigger. Each department has far greater expertise than perhaps we might have had 30, 40 years ago. And Gary is right. Most jurisdictions have moved away from the model where the governing body hears appeals and leaves it with either a city manager, a county administrator, or in some cases, a contracts officer in the larger procurement offices in larger counties. It's just a more streamlined process to ensure that the people at the county who are most familiar with both the contracting process and that particular award are the ones who are hearing the appeal. They're not necessarily the ones who actually decided the award. I mean, lots of times that's, staff and perhaps other consultants, but it does focus the appeal on the folks with the greatest amount of expertise. Not that you guys don't, but generally speaking, you're not the ones who know how many widgets it takes to build a doggone bridge. So, and that's why we're coming forward, simply to modernize it and make sure the process can move along in a timely clip with the folks who are most familiar with the contract.
Thank you. So I have a question and then a suggestion. So does the department director have a role in approving the contract winner or the bid winner? Do they see the contract at some point?
I mean, I can say that I do. So the contracting agency, I think that whoever in health and has been assigned that, they would have that as well. I think if it's in the sheriff's office, I believe that they do. Again, we're still small enough that we do have those duties and responsibilities. So.
Sure. So pardon me, I just have some things I'd like to say and then I'll let the other commissioners chime in. So I agree that the process is definitely old and outdated. I'm going to suggest that perhaps we go in a different direction. I guess my issue is that having it be appealed to the director could be seen as bias or conflict of interest, if that's the department that, made the decision. So I would suggest that number one, it would be appealed to the county administrator. And then after that, it can be appealed still to the Board of Commissioners to determine if the county administrator acted in a capricious and arbitrary manner. And the county administrator could still, of course, consult with staff along the way and hear both sides. I feel like every time that we operationalize parts of our job, we're giving away some of our responsibilities. And once you give it away, it's much harder to get it back. And I'm not saying this out of a desire for power. I'm just thinking if I am a community member, I want the ability to take an issue to the highest level of decision-making, and that is the Board of Commissioners. I believe part of our roles and responsibilities of being a commissioner and elected official is to be a set of impartial eyes on an appeal. So yes, we're not the experts, but I believe we do still have a role to play being, in a set of impartial eyes. I think doing it this way still gives the county administrator the bulk of the decision-making power, but it gives us the opportunity, or the Board of Commissioners, to have oversight. And then we are just deciding if the county administrator acted in a capricious and arbitrary manner. Again, having said all that, there is room for change in the process, tightening up some of the ins and outs, lengthening the time period, perhaps charging a nominal administration fee. I don't know if we do that now. Setting a more clear role for the hearing. I don't know if that belongs in the ordinance or just in a someplace else, but 15 minutes for the appellant, 15 minutes for staff. And again, none of this is personal. I'm not thinking of this as me. I'm thinking of the institution. So all the commissioners that sit in these seats, all the county administrators to come, all the staff that comes. So it's not anything personal. And with that, I believe Commissioner Ozero, you wanted to say something?
Well, I wanted to say that I was having very similar reaction to the proposed language. We are, as staff have mentioned, small enough still that often the public contracting official is the department chair, and sometimes they're very close to the decision-making process. Sometimes they're not. And I was also questioning the impartiality of that person to review an appeal to a contract award. So I concur that I would like to see the county administrator in that primary role in terms of review of appeal, working with staff, and then have the option still for appeal to the board if it cannot be resolved at the county administrator level. I don't know that we need to institute a lot more process specificity, but certainly not in the code itself. But I agree that I had the same reaction.
Thank you. Other comments or questions?
I felt after the appeal process last October that there needs to be a change in the process coming to the directly to the board without much background. Doesn't seem like a good process. So I am all in favor of our county administrator being involved, and I'm not quite sure what this does to the existing proposal.
Maybe I could ask Vance the question. So, I mean, we can facilitate that. That's, I mean, we just write it and it happened, or Vance writes it. And we still have certain timeframes built in. So like this one, the once I send out the notice of intent to award, anybody that wants to protest has 7 days. to send me the information. And then at this point, that if they do, then it would go to Joe. Once he makes his decision, and usually it has to be made within 2 weeks or something like that. If they don't like that, then they would have, you could say, another 7 days to decide if they want to go to the next level, which would be you. And then we would schedule a meeting. So my question, I think those timeframes are still the same. The only thing I would ask is, do we need to do a public hearing at the board, or can we just have it be a regular item? Because having a public hearing can also lengthen out
Yes.
the time frame for that, because it really comes down to the person that's appealing going directly to the board. That would be my question. Or
That is a really good question. The challenge of scheduling a public
Yeah.
hearing is a little different than putting it as an agenda item on an available to fit within the time frame. And that's really was the biggest hurdle we faced with this last one, was trying to fit the appeal in within the time frame. So it does not need to be a public hearing because it's our process. We can establish the vehicle, if you will, through which the board considers the appeal. So we can simply say that it would be placed on a board agenda, which would then give us a lot more flexibility for fitting an appeal to the board in within the required time frame.
So I prefer to keep the public hearing. I don't know if there's a way that we can change the language to better, suit the timing for the public hearing, but it might sound silly, but this is the community's money that is paying for the contracts. So if there is someone that wants to weigh in, I think they should have the opportunity.
Well, that just be aware that can open up a can of worms that may not always be germane to an appeal. Typically, when a contractor appeals an award, they have a very specific proposal related basis for the appeal. We didn't consider their experience. We didn't consider the fact that they just brought on electrical engineers to do something. And so while I'm not discounting the value of public input, for a contract appeal, the value we get may not be as great as the effort it takes to put a public hearing notice together and schedule it.
And that's part of the reason that I suggested that we change how we are judging it to simply if the county administrator acted in a capricious and arbitrary manner. That narrows down the scope of the judgment. We're not actually judging the appeal on its merits. We're just deciding if the county administrator acted fairly or not.
And in that case, if that's the direction the three of you wish to go, then I would say it's even less of an issue to have a public hearing. Because the public isn't going to know if the county administrator acted arbitrarily or capricious. That's really going to be an argument for the contractor to put forward, and then he or she is going to have to submit some evidence to that. And then you three are going to have to, your successors, whoever they may be, are going to have to decide whether within the context of that appeal to the county administrator, there was some sort of arbitrary or capricious element. It's not going to be outside evidence that comes in from public. It's going to be almost like it's going to bubble up for you to consider rather than coming from the outside in.
Sure, and I completely agree with what you've said, and I wouldn't doubt that no one even shows up. However, just in my heart, I am always going to lean towards the public and public input, public feedback, and public hearings.
Sure. I just have a couple of comments I want to share.
Sure, please.
So three things in particular. First of all, I think thank you, John. I wanted to share a couple of items, three in particular. First, I think when the original code was developed, it was at a time when there was not a county administrator. And so over the years, we have changed, if you will, how we operate. And now that we do have this particular position, I do advocate for changing our current process. So at the time it was developed, I don't think we have the role that we now have today. I do think that the county administrator, whether or not it's myself or someone else, that it does provide a updated, more modern process that in some cases, as you indicated, does delegate authority from the board to the county administrator. So I do think that the county administrator should have a role in the process. I do like what you're suggesting in terms of how to narrow the appeal process, if you will, after it reaches me, as you suggested, from an arbitrary and capricious perspective. So anyway, just a little bit of context about not having a county administrator that many years ago. Second of all, Gary talked about department directors, and department directors are usually involved in the decision making. However, especially as it relates to larger contracts, some that we're now experiencing because of our justice system project, they are large awards, and typically we have a team that is going through the evaluation and selection process. So typically, for large awards, it involves a team as opposed to one particular person that is making a decision. Third, I would like to share a concern in your comments earlier. And I think I heard you say that we would be okay with lengthening the process if need be. And so I wanted to express a concern about that, because the longer we extend the time frame, keep in mind we have a contract that cannot be negotiated, which oftentimes, because of our timelines and our deadlines, that will delay the project. So just a cautionary note about not extending the timelines too significantly, because it definitely has an impact on the project.
Well, thank you for clarifying that. And I guess my purpose in saying lengthening was really to say to be more flexible. We can provide flexibility, whether we need to lengthen or shorten or whatever changes we need to make time-wise. If we need to make changes, I'm happy to do that.
Thank you.
Other comments or questions?
As far as the public input, the public can have, just like this morning, testimony at the beginning of the meeting or at the advice of the chair, and place that testimony maybe in a more appropriate place in the agenda. So I don't see us as cutting out the public by not going through the public hearing process. And I think it is important to keep in mind the timeline and getting things done in a efficient manner.
So question, if we do not have a public, okay, so if we, you're suggesting not having a public hearing at all, not just
Correct.
having a hearing and not having the public comment? No public hearings, like you're saying? Yeah. Okay,
Right,
thank
but
you.
public comment at the appropriate work session.
Sure, but again, so, that's kind of dependent on the chair, and if the chair decides not to take comment, 10 years from now, if it's whoever the chair is. I'm just working this out in my head, so.
As the chair, I mean, since I've been around the chair, I don't think it's said, well, you can't testify. So I don't see that as
Okay.
An issue.
Your thoughts, Commissioner Ogeron?
I agree that I don't believe it's necessary to have a public hearing, to have the issue raised to the level of the Board of Commissioners, questioning the county administrator's decision, whether it's arbitrary and capricious.
So we have one commissioner who prefers public test or the public hearing, two that do not, so that provides direction for not including the public hearing in the process. What else do we need to decide to give staff direction?
So if I understand the direction of the conversation, you are in favor of having the first level appeal be the county administrator and a second appeal to the Board of Commissioners to be placed on an agenda. And so the question then that remains is, would that appeal be limited to only evaluation, whether there is arbitrary or capricious element to the county administrator's decision? Or would it be a full-blown de novo review?
Thoughts?
would that term arbitrary and capricious also cover perceived bias? Conflict of interest?
It could, by whom?
By the county administrator.
By the county minister. We, you know, we could add that.
Yeah.
There's no reason we can't add that. So sure.
Commissioner Malone, your thoughts?
Are you writing it?
Are you writing this down?
Yes.
Well, I'll go back to what I said originally, and the process needs to be revised, coming directly to what the board of commissioners, I think is inappropriate. I had a little experience with a group going over proposals for picking owner's rep for our projects and refresh my memory, Gary, there were 5 of us evaluating for proposals.
I think so. We usually have 5 to 7. That's typical.
So it's not set up to please the department head, or there's a pretty good, should be a pretty good range of
Yes.
viewpoints.
So we have worked very hard in the last, I'd say, couple of years especially, to really diversify and broaden the folks that are on our evaluation panels so that we bring different perspectives in. And I think the selection of DLR, actually, we went through that process. We had a very diverse group that was part of that process.
And I think that's probably the key part of the process that I say is important is getting good review initially of the projects and having a team coming to a conclusion. So I guess that's where I would put my emphasis, making sure that part of the process is robust and that the evaluations come out and seemed like we had a matrix to deal with, came out with scores, and it wasn't, well, I like this one or that. I mean, it was somewhat objective scoring. So I think that's, I've been involved in one process and I felt like it was, there were good viewpoints represented and a good discussion. As far as I know, a good outcome.
So I have a question. Do we have that process outlined somewhere in a policy, or I apologize, I didn't have time to read the entirety of chapter 2.
So, Commissioner, in fact, I'm looking at the checklist right now on the proposed first page under salient issues. If you go down to 2.805, you'll see there's 7 items in there, and that lays out the timeframes. But I would say what will, and now that I've had a chance to think about this, we would just modify it by changing number 3 to the COO. And then if you go to number 5, we would then make that the board. And I would work with Vance on adding the language that kind of frames what the appellant would have to say, the arbitrary, capricious, whatever it is. But after that, you know, I think it stays the same. We just make sure the names all match the timeframes.
Okay, that sounds good. I think back to my question, do we have the process that Commissioner Malone referenced in a policy somewhere?
We do not. And candidly, I'm not sure you want to go that direction because every single one of these RFPs presents a very different review, a solicitation, an evaluation. So the question that then becomes, do you want to lock yourself in?
Yeah.
Oh, I thought this was the evaluation, the process for evaluating.
I said, do we have it in a policy?
Yes. Well, we have contract policy that Vance has just
Yes,
reworked.
yes.
And we have contract policies that stipulate what the processes are for different values of contracts.
Yes.
And we
Yes.
could indeed add to a contract policy for any contract that's over a certain value, that it has to go through a formal review team process, you know, and lay out some criteria without being too prescriptive about the process.
So one thing to recognize is our RFP process. All of the proposals state the process in the proposal, so. And I can't recall any of them having fewer than 3 people evaluating the proposals. So the specifics are not in the policy. But I think the general expectation is in policy right now. Maybe this is something we can circle back to after we come forward with this appeal update, and present it to you at a work session and ask if there's something like that.
Well, so the second half of my sentence, if I can remember what it was gonna be, was something about, so thank you for answering that question, everyone. I don't believe that we do need to have a very prescriptive policy on this. And so I have every faith in our current staff. I think everyone does a great job. I don't know what the county is gonna look like in 20 years, but it is my job today to try to make sure that in 20 years from now, things are still going well. And so having this appeals process is even more important, I believe, if we don't have that very prescriptive policy. And again, I'm not saying that I think we should, I'm just saying that's more reason that we still have this appeal process.
I would argue that, yes, we should come back at a future work session and take a look at our contracting policy again and see whether or not there is a not extremely prescriptive process, but some general language we can add that at least institute our values when it comes to reviewing proposals and our approach to doing so, so that we have a basis for which the county administrator to be judged as to what has been arbitrary and capricious about the process, because right now I don't think we do.
Okay.
Is that sufficient direction, or is there?
Oh, we
things
have
can
all kinds
clarify?
of direction. And actually, we're gonna get- yeah, we have direction. Yes, in terms of coming back on the 6th, I think we have good direction for what you wish to see in an amendment to chapter 2. And we have, I think, a pretty good idea of what you'd like to see probably after the first year coming back to take a look at that policy in work session.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Gary. Oh,
Gary, does what we're talking about still fit your timeline? You mentioned
Yeah, because I think we'll have
Something-
the modified language at the meeting of the 6th. And we'll be able to.
Okay.
And I appreciate it.
all right, thank you very much. And with that, I believe we can move on to item 4.2, the update from Oregon Cascades West Council of Governments. Come on up. Good to see you all. We have Ryan Vogt, Executive Director. And let's see, I also have listed Alicia. Lucky, welcome.
Morning, Commissioners. Thank you so much for having us for a quarterly update from the Cascades West Council of Governments. Although I think this last year we had a thing that made it more of a tri-annual, right? Maybe that's what it was. But thank you so much for having us today. For the record, I am Ryan Vogt, the Executive Director for the Cascades West Council of Government. We provided you a little bit of information about kind of what's going on with our programs right now. I'd like to give that ahead of time so that you have some things to look over in case there's some questions. So I won't belabor the report that we've provided. A couple of things that are moving right now at our agency that are probably of some merit for making sure they're here for you is this week, we will be in the process, unfortunately, of recruiting again for a new community and economic development director. Our director, Jenny Glass, has been an amazing asset to the organization for the last 2 years. So much so that the San Francisco Federal Reserve picked her up to be a regional manager for Alaska, Washington, and Oregon, where she will be helping to move money through nonprofit organizations to serve at a larger level. So it's really a great opportunity for her. It's a testimony to the incredible talent that she brought to the agency, and it is a significant loss for us. But we will move with some diligence in the hopes that we can land somebody of equal caliber, or perhaps better. I'm always optimistic that better's on the horizon, but that is certainly some tough shoes to fill. And I know that she has done an incredible job these last couple of years of kind of bridging some of the economic development conversation across the region and getting a little bit more parity to where it is that individual cities, counties are going. Some real solid work on our comprehensive economic development strategy document, things like that, to try and get different levels of alignment. And of course, a lot of work on some of the bigger issues like broadband and things that she's been championing. So we'll be working very hard to make sure that those things don't fall while we're in the process. I also wanted to highlight, I think we may have talked about this last time, and I know Commissioner Malone is intimately aware of this conversation, but when I came on at the organization, one of the things that struck me was that we were lacking a kind of a documented strategic plan for where we're going, where we're making solid decisions, and how we go about making those decisions, and what the horizon planning is for us. And it was through that kind of discovery phase coming on and saying, I like to stand behind a strategic plan that at least paints the vision. Now it's adaptable, but at least says this is where we're trying to go over the course of the next couple of years. But in the course of starting to do that strategic planning work, what we realized was the organization's initial iteration of formation was in 1967. And a number of things have changed since then. And what we didn't have was a solid, relevant, and current mission statement about what it is that we do and why we do it, or a current vision statement about where it is that we're headed and how we seek to make decisions in the organization. And then to kind of round that out, we also asked all of our staff to participate in a values exercise where I stepped completely back and asked our staff, what are the values for which you conduct the work that you do, that you wish to be judged by, and you wish 50 years from now or 53 years from now, different executive director to look back and say, this was the value set that the organization brought to the region, and this is the way they conducted their business. And so we now have a new mission statement, some new vision statement, and a value set of 5 that was crafted entirely by our staff, of the reasons why they come and do the work that they do. And so on next Thursday, the board will be finalizing our strategic plan with all of that information in there. So I'm not going to get out in front of it, although the individual elements have already been approved one piece at a time. But I'm very, very excited that we now have kind of a roadmap for what it is that our member agencies can expect us to be focused on and driving our work towards. And really the 5 highlighted areas, the major strategic priorities over the next couple of years, in no particular order, is going to be around ongoing increased partnerships and collaboration. And those are areas that are kind of core to the function of the work that we do. Is we are only able to be successful through our partnerships and leveraging those relationships throughout the member agencies. Of note would be particular focus under the strategic priority around our ongoing unification work with Community Services Consortium. We have a highlighted area on diversity, equity, and inclusion. This is over the course of the next couple of years, particularly internally focused. As we move through and become a more culturally competent and bias reduced agency, we will be setting the table for allowing member agencies to come when we have trainings and things of that nature. But the focus is really about us getting our shop in order. We have lots and lots of work to do in that arena, but I'm really thrilled that through both stakeholder interviews and through staff interviews, that staff are very hungry for this work and really want to invest in this work. We're going to have an operational excellence category, which is about us continuing to do the work that we believe is foundational and core to us, and that our member agencies are saying, this is the work that you should continue doing. But we have a responsibility to also try and find ways to always improve those, expand those, or make them more relevant whenever possible. We have an area on increased visibility and brand awareness. I know that that's not the language that we used for it. But at every turn, whether it's even our own staff members, unfortunately, or member agencies, there's a whole lot of the cog does everything. So we're not entirely sure what it is the cog does. And to that end, right, if you were to ask people on the street, who's the cog, they would say, who are you? Or I don't know. So, you know, it's a little bit of a push-pull because I want to make sure that the people who could benefit from our services or are eligible from our services know exactly where to go, what to do, how to access those services. I personally don't have a lot of ego invested in whether or not they know that was the cog versus the program that they needed to experience. That being said, we recognize that we have some level of diminishment or conflict by not being able to co-brand where people know, if I'm getting Meals on Wheels, I'm also working with the COG, or if I'm getting seniors and disability services, I'm also working with the COG. And so that will be an increased area of focus for us. And then finally, we have an innovation area, which really sets the stage for how it is we will make decisions on expansion of new programs, bringing together best thinking either from member agencies or from our own staff about what might be missing, what might be the next niche for us to help fill in the region, and really give some highlight and focus for that. So those are kind of the, in a nutshell, the 5 priority areas that we'll be focusing on for the next couple of 3 years. And we will have a published document out by January that I'll be happy to share with you so that you can see with a little bit more context what those areas are and what it is that we're focused on. Now, outside of those larger organizational elements that we're focused on, wanted to probably highlight and talk a little bit about 2 things that I think are of a strong interest to you all as commissioners, and then of course open for any other conversations. But the 2 things that I think we really wanted to talk a little bit about today is the status of our bias incidents conversation, with regionally conversation and through our contract Zelo, and then also the current status of what's going on with our veterans program, which we provide on behalf of you all. So starting with the bias incident response conversation, Zelo International has more or less completed the work that was formulated in the original envisioning of the contract. They had a summit about a month ago. Were any of you able to attend the summit by any chance? No. Okay. So we had it was a virtual summit to kind of unveil their initial thinkings about what they gathered from their research and from the work with the communities. And what I would say is the feedback I think that we got in that conversation was that in as much as there was quite a bit of outreach work and effort to try and bring people to the table, the numbers of people who actually engaged in the process was still pretty low. And as a result of that, there becomes probably a meritorious discussion about, you know, if you have only so many people showing up, how much weight can you give to any particular recommendation that comes to the table? And there was a number of different recommendations that have come to the table. And so I think Zelo is still kind of trying to grapple with, I don't want to put words in their mouth, but I think they're still trying to figure out what are the right recommendations to bring forward. And are those recommendations really of regional relevance, or are those recommendations really more localized? And that's something that, you know, coming back, that individual member agencies could maybe apply a new lens to and decide what of these recommendations kind of resonates for me, and what of these recommendations maybe could have more, you know, kind of broader application. We have worked with Zelo from some of that feedback as well to see if we can do a couple of more focused sessions and additional engagement. One of the things that was striking and was noted multiple times was that, you know, Zelo, being an expert in this space, did a lot of work with some of our BIPOC entities like the NAACP and things of that nature, and yet there wasn't the depth of representation we would have liked to have seen from those groups. And so there was some additional curiosity about whether or not we could try a new engagement effort to make sure that we have strength of voice from those communities to the table. So I will ask Alicia, as the kind of the contract administrator, if she's got, she probably has much more details.
Sure, I'd be happy to. Hello, my name is Alicia Lucky, and I'm the Community Services Program Manager at the COG, as we call it affectionately. I would say, I would echo what Ryan said about our focus groups. You know, we had 5 different focus groups, no participants in Lebanon, around 20 to 25 in Corvallis and Albany. But I was struck that with both of those groups, we were asked for simultaneous Spanish interpretation. And we actually, you know, more than other focus groups we've done in the community, had a really strong representation from the Latino community. So I was really pleased with that. We also had around, I think, 8 to 10 participants in Newport. Again, not as many folks as we would like, but I would say that when folks came, that they did have a lot to say in the space. We had feedback that some people showed up and thought this is a conversation solely around race. Other people said, you know, particularly in Newport, they reported more issues of gender bias in the workplace. And so we had folks representing communities with developmental disabilities. And so we kind of had this whole gamut. As we move forward, you know, part of this RFP task 1 was to kind of research and catalog those existing resources in place. And so it's noteworthy that the state of Oregon in 2020 created this hotline reporting system. And so what in the research that we found from Zelo is that from 2020 to 2021, there was a 650% increase in referrals from community partner agencies. And so Zelo, and kind of its draft final reports, is saying, you know, that demonstrates that there's an opportunity here for COG and member governments to kind of act as a liaison between the reporting line and the communities. We know that being able to report a bias is not enough. You know, it's going to have to be more. Some other things that kind of bubbled to the top was the opportunity for engagement and outreach. We saw that specifically in our elected officials survey, whereas, you know, different municipalities and counties did not agree about the extent to which bias was in the region. They, you know, there did seem to be some consensus around wanting to do more on the local level. And so, as Ryan mentioned, we're going to add a few more tasks to Zelo's contract, extending the time a bit more to kind of dig deeper and, you know, thinking, is this the right space? And we felt solidified in that decision. Just in the last week, we've gotten a ping from the Corvallis Chamber interested in wanting to do some outreach to marginalized business owners. We got a email from OSU Procurement Office that wanted to talk about the findings of the research and kind of dig a little bit deeper with us. And so I'm excited for this next phase. You know, I know that we're not going to tackle the issue of bias in a year with one contract, but we're excited to use this as a launch pad and kind of see where it takes us. So I wanted to say too that we had you know, if you have questions about how the surveys were designed, we did have a stakeholders group that helped kind of pull together the questions and, you know, determine the locations. We landed on having non-elected government DEI experts And what do you know, there's not a whole bunch in that space in our region, but Johan was able to really help in that process before they left. And so, I just wanted to thank them for that work. In particular, they were able to expose us to the DOJ and their bias reporting contact, which has been really wonderful throughout this whole process. We also worked with the police chief in the city of Albany, an HR department lead in Lincoln County. And so we really feel really good about that group that's kind of worked with us along the way. Do we have any questions before we jump into vets?
I'm not sure about questions. I have some comments.
Sure.
Basically, thank you for coming today and updating us. We've definitely heard some questioning lately from different community members and aspects of the community saying, hey, where is this? How is it going? Not being forgotten, is it? So we appreciate you coming here today and highlighting this information. I like, you said reporting is not enough, which, I completely agree with, but it's an important start. Because as you mentioned, people argue about how much bias really is in their community. And if it's not being reported, many people just frankly won't believe that it exists. So very good, important first step. Any other questions or comments?
I guess I have one comment, and I would echo what Chair Wise has said, that I too have gotten community feedback about the fact that this funding was received by Council of Governments from the city of Corvallis primarily quite a while ago. And I think they're still very frustrated that there hasn't been action or change, especially in Corvallis, because the group of folks that pushed for this initiative here were very focused on Corvallis. And so that's tough. And I understand why you've extended the contract. And I think that focusing on deepening those local recommendations or fine tuning is important. I think working with both NAACP and Casa Latinos Unidos and the other Latino facing community groups is going to be important to see what can be done now. Is there anything that can be done now rather than perpetual study?
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner. I have heard that sentiment as well, some concerns, particularly by constituents from the city of Corvallis. I think there's two narratives there to try and manage, and neither one of those really kind of satiates that hunger. And one is by the city of Corvallis had an intent to move in this area. They had enough foresight after a couple of months to say maybe we should engage in a larger conversation, because bias probably is experienced in other communities, not just Corvallis, and engage the COG in that conversation. It did, unfortunately, take a number of months to gain enough momentum and education in order for that to get to a place where the board wanted the COG to actually engage in that effort. And so there is understandably a time element, because it's been, 18 months or what have you, at least probably since the city of Corvallis initially put some money aside to try and be responsive to the constituents that were coming to their city council. The other, I'm sorry.
Clarifying question, when you reference the board, which board are you?
I'm sorry, the COGS board, because it was an approach. It was an approach by the city to the COG to see whether or not the COGS board would be interested in taking a larger look at the incidence of bias. But then the second potentially challenging narrative component to this is the body of work that the COG was asked to do was to engage a contractor to find out what the community might want. So it was an engagement exercise around what bias, what is the experience of the community related to bias? What does the community know or not know about the existing systems that exist? What do we know or not know about the existing systems that might exist? And what recommendations then would come forward from the community as actionable things to do? So So an increased point of frustration that may come to you, and I just want to try to manage that up front, is that the body of work that COG was asked to do was not to actually provide a solution. It was to try and get recommendations from the community about what a solution might look like. And then any additional work towards actually investing in whatever that solution may be has not been contemplated at this point. So I think when we get the final report information, we will have some elements to put forward for you all and other decision makers to decide, is this a body of work that resonates for my community? And if so, do I want to take that on in terms of next steps, or do we really think that there is enough of a tipping point that a regional entity like the COG should be invested in trying to help move that forward? I continue to have really no ego invested in the reality that the COG is not a leader in this space. You heard me mention just a few moments ago that from a strategic planning standpoint, we're working to try and educate our 200 staff members on diversity, equity, and inclusion issues that are affecting us with recruitment, with retention, with engagement of the community, and our own narratives that we bring to the table every day. But it continues to be, if there is a tipping point where there is efficiency in having a body do work for multiple communities, that is part of the heartbeat of who we are. And so we're open to that conversation if our decision makers direct us in that way. So I wish I was saying, yep, we have a solution. It's got a bow on it. You know, happy holidays. Here we go. We're going to unpack it. But that wasn't the intent of the exercise. So.
Well, I appreciate the discussion on the bias response effort. It's been, like you say, percolating along for quite a while, and look forward to more information on that. I wanted to go back to what you said earlier, Ryan. What does the COG do? And as Benton County liaison to the COG, I'm still trying to figure that out. I think of the COG as a friendly octopus. Quite a bit going on, and a little difficult to and capture all the efforts. I appreciate your efforts, Ryan, getting out into different communities and talking about what the COG does. We had the COVID challenge and not being able to meet in person and get some of those more in-depth conversations or casual conversations in the hallway to fill in some of the details. But I would definitely encourage that effort. It's a little bit of a difficult discussion because of the varied nature of the COG's efforts, but I think it's a very worthwhile effort to raise our profile, whether it's transportation issues or senior issues or economic development or the bias response effort. And you briefly mentioned CSC, and I don't know if this is the right time to maybe give us a little update where those, speaking of long-term projects and discussions that have been going on for at least a couple of years, but maybe a brief update on the status of those discussions would be useful.
Sure, I'm happy to fill in some of the blanks there, Commissioner. So I believe that all the commissioners are kind of readily aware that there's been a conversation going on for quite some time about how the partnership between Community Services Consortium and the Council of Governments could be enhanced or enriched. there has been a different language applied to it over perhaps the last 7 or 8 years. And for quite some time, there was the word merger was used quite readily in terms of should we potentially be one agency? It's been my experience coming into the organization and from prior organizations outside that can be kind of a daunting and scary word for people. So outside of whether or not the leadership components previously existed in the two organizations to move through that conversation is irrelevant. I think that vocabulary. I can't speak twice. It is problematic and creates a defensive posture for staff. So as I came on board and started to look at really what I believed the intent of the boards in that conversation was less about the language and more about really what is already the heartbeat and the core of what both of these regional entities do. And that is, how do we do more with less, or how do we kind of exponentially apply what we have to feed a larger body? And I think what our relevant governing boards, were asking of us is to say, well, the Council of Governments already serves a region, already serves a population, and Community Services Consortium serves the exact same region, and there is crossover with a sizable portion of the population. Predominantly, a number of seniors crossover and people of lower income spectrum crossover both of our agencies. And then arguably on the Council of Government side, economic development affects everybody in the region of all income levels. And what I think the two governing boards were asking is, if this body over here has learned how to really do more for the region by being a regional entity instead of a single city or single county entity, and this body has done the same, is it possible that by having the two of them work more closely together, we are increasing our fingerprints even more, and we are reducing barriers for the consumers that we see? So Community Services Consortium's current director, Peggy McGuire, and I have been having regular conversations in alignment with what we believe that vision to be. And that is, how do we take our staff and instill a vision that as regional entities, we continue to have a responsibility for serving the entire region. And that includes reducing barriers for some of our most vulnerable people throughout the region to access our services that they're entitled to. Okay, so that's a vision component. What does that look like from a practical conversation? Well, Peggy McGuire, the director for Community Services Consortium, has begun talking about kind of an end game for her career and retirement area. I'm not going to expose that here because I don't know how broadly she's put that out there, but that puts us in motion for a several year time frame to really talk about what do we want to look like a couple of years from now. What does she want her legacy to be, and what can we do to really push this conversation? Our plan right now, and Commissioner Malone, this is a sneak peek for what will be going on in the conversation next week, but our vision right now is to have an end game where by the time Ms. McGuire retires, that our two organizations essentially operate as one, at least in the Albany area and Benton County, operate as one with the exception of IGAs and things like that allow us to be two separate agencies, to position ourselves to a point where our two governing boards at that point in time can say, we believe we have squeezed everything we possibly can out of this in terms of being co-located, in terms of reducing barriers for our consumers that come in to see one service, and we're creating some level of universal eligibility. So if they come in for one service and we realize they're eligible for another, they don't have to go across town, fill out a new application, but they can step to the next desk, or we can bring the worker right over. They can just wheel their chair over and we can move through that process. We're in the process of purchasing a single enterprise software solution that will manage finances, HR, contracts, those components. We are both in agreement that we will purchase the same software solution. And what that means is that our finance departments and HR departments will be able to work with each other on one recruitment system, on one process for bringing people on board and getting their data into the system. And that system will also drive their payroll and their compensation conversation. So the one timekeeping system, the one accounts payable system, so that an HR group in Council of Governments, our HR team is 3, in Community Services Consortium is 2.5. So 2.5 people serving 200. 3 people serving 200, all of a sudden you have 5.5 people serving 500. Somebody can take vacation. It's okay for somebody to take vacation and you can still move on. And so the notion would be similarly with our tech services department, we have a vision out there and an expectation that any large scale software purchases that we will move towards the same hardware standard. So one agency is not going to have Dell laptops and one agency is going to have Microsoft laptops or whatever. We're going to move towards one laptop system. We're not going to have one agency working on Apple computers and one agency on Microsoft 365. We'll unify those. And again, so that these smaller teams can do a lot more for everybody, including the services that we provide for the communities. So there's a project plan that still needs to be built around that. The visioning document is done, but in terms of where we're headed, that's the vision for where you should see our partnership go for the next couple of years, and will be firmly embedded in Council of Government strategic plan. Tactically, in Corvallis, both entities are looking for, well, Council of Governments really has a lease that's expiring, and we are looking at whether or not continuing in the same location, but expanding space or moving into a different space makes sense. And Community Services Consortium is in that conversation because whatever we do, we're going to co-house. And in Albany, Community Services Consortium has already given us intent to move all of their Albany operations into our building. And so we are freeing that up right now. That's first tactical steps.
Comments or questions on that?
I appreciate that background and would like to point out close to between 3 and 4 years ago, previous executive director, the word merger was tossed around pretty freely, and I didn't think that was the right term, and I'm glad that take a little while, but that idea is permeated the discussion, because I think that's really important, that know where somebody's not taking over somebody else. This is trying to figure out where the common ground lies, and being obviously fairly deliberate about the approach. But I think that makes sense. And talking about the HR and 2.5 people here and 3 people here reminded me that at Joe Kirby's direction, we merged natural areas and parks and fairgrounds. We had 2 fairly small departments. And like you say, if the director showed up, things were worked fine, and if they didn't, there wasn't any backup. And I think this seems similar, combining efforts and both sharing locations and sharing some tasks. So I think we're on the right track, and we appreciate the update.
All right, I just want to do a quick time check. We are behind in our agenda, but I want to make sure we're almost due for a break, but I want to make sure we get through the veterans piece before that. So.
Sure, thank you. So I can be brief here. So you have your veterans report from Miss Molly. Her last day was yesterday. Our joke is that we've told her, you know, we need to get out and do more outreach, and in her OSU outreach, they nabbed her. So her hope is to be working with veterans at OSU. And yesterday we spoke a lot about, you know, 6 months from now, let's make sure that we're working together on something. The good news is if you recall the last fiscal year, we had quite a bit of carry forward money. And so we decided to build a little bit of capacity so that she could, you know, leave the office a bit and get out and do a little bit more in a post-COVID era. And so in that, we brought in Ian Briggs, who has many, many years. He could probably run the ODBA, frankly. He's very qualified to be a VSO. And so with this move, we can make him permanent. He was hired on a limited duration capacity. And then also Mark Lipinskis, who's our latest VSO, actually received accreditation earlier than we thought, which is amazing. And so they are up and ready to roll. We are looking at doing a salary study of all represented staff. And so knowing that that's coming down the pike in the next quarter, we've decided to do a workout of class for them and kind of divvy up duties. I'm going to be assuming some of those managerial aspects of the team. And my hope is that we kind of right size the position. I met with the ODVA last week and was told I'm on the right track. Thanks to bias response, I'm getting close with David over at HR in Lincoln County. And if you look at the entire state in size and scope of number of veterans, we are almost hand in hand with Lincoln County. They also asked us to look at Columbia County. They, like us, are operating on a pass-through type deal where with the community action agency and have a similar amount of veterans as Benton County. And so we're going to kind of look at what they have going on there. Columbia, they just have one VSO. And so we do feel like, and after talking with the ODVA last week, that we are right in having two. I also have, for the first time in 8 years, I'm telling anyone that will listen to me, grocery store cashier, whoever, that I have an admin. So I'm very excited about that. Her name is Melissa Wright. And part of her duties is a triaging veteran phone calls for Benton County. And so the calls are going right to her, which is exciting. And then yesterday we received our work study application for a veteran from OSU. And so he'll be starting in January. He served in the Navy for a number of years and now is getting an engineering degree at OSU. We are lucky because we are approved to have him over a series of his studies at OSU. He's only a sophomore, and so we hope to have him for the next 3 years to kind of help with some of the outreach. Finally, we worked really closely with the Older Adult Health Behavioral Initiative folks. And so we are going to pilot with them starting in January with this new work study and myself, evidence-based depression intervention. It's called behavioral activation, and it's a 6-week kind of course that you go through with folks that are waiting for clinical support, you know, are showing signs of depression, have mentioned it to the VSO. We're going to be meeting with them and kind of going through a series of counseling and activities. And so this is a really neat space to be in. I think when we talk about the COG and we say, we do all things for all people, this is one example where I think we've been able to pull in some really neat pieces from Senior and Disability Services, the VSO, my work on the community, and really do something neat in this space specifically for vets. And so I'm excited to be able to talk more about that with you, maybe at an upcoming meeting to see how we're going. But as for the Veterans Office, we feel like we're in solid footing. Obviously, sorry to see Molly go, but we feel like we do have a good bench.
And if I may, in alignment with the conversation that Commissioner Malone was just asking about, is that the relationship with the veterans programs between Council of Governments and Community Services Consortium has waned over the last couple of years. And so we kind of restarted stepping on the accelerator to make sure that the Veteran Services Program for Community Services Consortium for the Council of Governments and also for Samaritan are in regular conversations. Council of Government and Samaritan are co-housed. They sit right across the hall from each other. So that's a regular dialogue. But I think Community Services Consortium's Veterans Program has been distanced from that conversation. And so really at the executive director level, we have been meeting to drive vision around these three people, these three programs, regularly investing together to serve, particularly the veterans in Benton County community. And that is also deeply part of that co-housing conversation that will be coming.
Thank you. You just answered the question I was going to ask.
Excellent. We know that, the veterans program has been kind of equally impacted by turnover as some of the other programs that exist throughout our agency and throughout the communities. And for a smaller program, it feels a little bit deeper at times. I don't think we could possibly be more blessed than to have Mark and Ian, and they're both accredited and with incredible experience under their belts. We will obviously keep Administrator Kirby and Commissioner Ojero aligned in any of the conversations that are going on, because both of them are kind of really in tune with where we're at with the veterans program. We're always happy to come back if there's concerns or anything, any other updates that you want.
All right, any other comments or questions?
Sure, Leslie, I have a couple of quick comments. Ryan, thank you for that. I'm going to be asking Laura Kwiatkowski, who's my executive assistant, to reach out and get a meeting set.
Excellent.
The contract that we have with COG for veteran services, I believe, expires at the end of June off the top of my head. So we should get together and begin discussing that. That's number one. Number two, going back to the previous conversation regarding CFC, I think it's very insightful for you to be looking at the systems and the infrastructure required, because I think so oftentimes as organizations come together, as you're envisioning, that's an afterthought. And after the organizations make a formal decision years down the road, then they decide, oh, let's look at our systems and how do we integrate those. You're doing that well in advance, and I applaud you for that.
Thank you. Appreciate that. And for the record, since it is not yet copyrighted, if anybody wants to use the word vocabulary, you are welcome to use it.
Might have to do that. And friendly occupants.
Friendly occupant. I wrote that down. Yeah, absolutely. That might be our new mascot.
All right, well, thank you very much. Any last comments or questions?
Yeah, I was really hoping to hear a little bit more in depth about the Stand By Me program and the status of the program, but let's save that for next time.
Okay, I'd love to. We just had our first in-person coaches training, so very
Yeah.
excited. Contract with Casa Latinos to host a series of workshops for us, so we are moving ahead. Yeah,
Excellent.
good stuff.
Excellent.
Very good. Well, thank you so much
Thank you,
for
Commissioner.
coming today and sharing all that great information with us. All right, and with that, I'm going to call for a 5-minute break. We will come back at 10:24.
Recording stopped. Recording in progress.
I think we are ready to come back. All right, we are back, and next up on the agenda is our consent calendar, which we have a slew of meeting minutes that were very well done, and I especially wanted to thank staff for the October 4th minutes. There are some very detailed conversations there, and you did a great job capturing it. I thought very helpful. All right, do I hear a motion to approve or make any changes?
Move to approve the consent calendar.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Moving along to new business. We have item 6.1, proposed sale of county-owned property. And with us, we have Rick Krager, Financial Services, and Michael Gilardi with Gilardi Law. And Michael, please correct me if I got your last name wrong.
No, you got it right. Thank you.
Perfect.
Good morning, Commissioners. Great to see you once again. I am here today with Mr. Gilardi to present a resolution R22017, which is to accept an offer from Hubbard Family LLC for $2,500 for the acquisition of a couple piece of properties that the county currently owns. So this is a first for me since joining the county, and as Vance said, we don't do these too often, so it may be a first for some of you as well. So as pulled up, it's always easy to kind of see a map, but just to kind of provide a little bit of background, one of the things through Oregon statutes, we are required to, in most cases, property that is owned by local government to sell through a auction process. However, there is an exception to that process, which is documented in the ORS, is that if the county has deemed that the property is not usable or developable, and that property is valued at less than $15,000, that we can accept offers directly. And that's basically the exemption that we're going off today. So what we're referring to is two pieces of property, and I've had a map pulled up. It's in your packet on page 103, but it's also here on the screen because it's always easy to see through pictures. And there you'll note that the easiest thing to kind of start with is the red line that you see there, which is the county line between Lane and Benton. And so the two pieces of property are referenced in the black highlights. So one is a parcel 00400, which is farmland. And then there is also a very, very small parcel you'll see there, 00700, which is actually a piece of a private road. I think the other thing that's important to point out here is all of those, it's a little bit hard to see on the screen, but kind of the blue diagonal lines, the properties that you see in the blue diagonal lines, those are all currently owned by Hubbard Family LLC. So essentially, this property is pretty much surrounded by that. So as part of our process, just to kind of give you a summary of what I have done, first and foremost was to check with all of our department heads. So community development, public works, and our national areas, parks and recreation. Checked with all three to make sure that there was no public use or deemed public use for these properties. They all have confirmed that there isn't. They were all very gracious in terms of providing, especially community development and thoughts and ideas. The second thing that I had done is to go to our county assessor to look at the values of the property. They have confirmed in both cases these would be less than $15,000. That was obviously important. The other element that I asked in terms of what they saw in the valuation was roughly about the same that is being proposed, approximately $2,600 is what they had come up with. You will also note in the packet, Mr. Gilardi was nice enough to provide some comparables of other areas that also demonstrates that this is a fair price that he is proposing here. And then the last piece, of course, once we've gone all through that, have been working with my good friend Vance here to move towards the title, the conveyance or the proposed title that would convey the land to the Hubbard Family LLC. So that's again in a nutshell, the process that we have gone through at this point. I would again recommend approval of this motion. Again, I think it's fair in terms of the price that's being offered. And again, I think it puts it in a position where the current owner of the adjacent properties would be able to use that. And I'm going to let Mr. Gilardi talk a little bit about in terms of a little bit of history and really more around the purpose of this. Last thing I will again just say before I turn it over to him, on page 104 is the resolution. So this is all documented within the resolution that would approve this offer or accept this offer, and then authorize the chair in terms of approving the deed that Vance will help with after we move through this action. So with that, I'll ask Mr. Gilardi if he'd like to provide any comments.
Good morning, commissioners. As you heard, I'm Michael Gilardi. I'm legal counsel to the Hubbard Family LLC, which you heard is the neighboring property owner and hopefully purchaser of these two parcels that are at issue. Hubbard owns roughly 500 acres of farmland adjacent to these two parcels. You can see some of that land on the map in front of you, and there's additional land to the north and east. I've been working with the family for several years to help plan for the future of the farm, and that has included working through some quirky property issues that are just a result of the local geography and history of the neighborhood. As you can see on the map, the Hubbard family's land straddles the Benton and Lane County border, and it's also right on the border of Lynn County as well, and that, you know, because of the river, and that presents its own set of issues. And so in working through these property issues, we discovered that there are these two little parcels of land that are owned by Benton County as a result of historical tax foreclosures on a former owner. The little road segment there was foreclosed by the county back in 1975. And the little larger parcel, tax lot 400, was foreclosed on in 2000. So the county has held these lands for quite some time, and you know, has not been using them. So we thought it would be helpful to Hubbard to be able to acquire this land, and also good for the county as well, given that the county's, you know, doesn't really have a use for the land, has not used the land, and it's really more of a liability than an asset to the county. So we approached the county staff almost a year ago now about this, and have been working with various folks at the county to try to facilitate this deal, including the valuation of the properties as Mr. Krager described. And so we're pleased to be able to bring this before you today. If you do approve this sale, Hubbard is going to integrate the larger parcel, number 4, into its farming operation. They're in the process of planting a hazelnut orchard and some of the neighboring areas there, and you know, so hope to be able to integrate tax lot 400 into the orchard. And then as for the road segment, Hubbard owns the rest of that road, both what is known as Adams Lane, including, you know, the stretch in Lane County and the stretch in Benton County. And so this will just help to unify the ownership and help with the management of the roadway. So with that background, I'm happy to answer any questions that you have, and thank you again for considering this.
Thank you. Comments or questions? I would just say that, you know, it doesn't seem like it does the county any good to sit on it. Seems like it would benefit the would-be buyer. And Rick, you seem to be very diligent going through every piece of this. So one question, I saw a note in the packet that there was going to be a quit claim deed provided. Did that make it in the packet?
It did not. I wasn't certain we were going to have a legal description. We had to have a legal description created by our survey team. So we didn't include it in the packet. It has been, it's done now. And if you approve the motion of the resolution, chair is authorized to sign that quitclaim deed.
Okay, just making sure that if we that we can still choose to move forward if we wish. Okay.
Yep.
Any other comments or questions, or I will entertain a motion.
I'll move to approve resolution R 2022-017 to accept an offer of $2,500 from Hubbard Family LLC to convey the ownership of the currently owned properties identified as tax lot 15-4-8-400 and 15-4-7-700.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carried.
Thank you very much, commissioners. And I also want to just say thanks to Mr. Gilardi. He's been very great to work with, very gracious. We were a little slowed down here the last couple of months, but appreciate his patience. He's been terrific and glad we were able to get to a final resolution today. Thank you.
Thank you all. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And Commissioner Chair Wise, I will have that in front of you tomorrow when Teresa is back so that she can notarize your signature. We can pass that on to Mr. Gilardi and he can get it recorded.
Okay, sounds like a plan. All right, and with that, we can move on to department reports and requests. We have item 7.1, Republic Services Annual Refuse Rate Index. Adjustments to solid waste collection rates. And with us, we have Daniel Reddick with Community Development. Welcome, sir.
Good morning, commissioners. Thank you so much for your time today. So today's agenda item is really just to communicate the annual refuse rate index adjustments for our solid waste collection rates in Benton County, and that's for the areas within the county's jurisdiction outside of city limits. And part of this the refuse rate index is calculated from the CPI as well as disposal costs, and this was communicated to us through Republic Services. I wanted to direct you to the packet attachment starting on page 119. The refuse rate index shows a calculation that would come out to 8.8% increase for the adjusted rates, and Republic Services has chosen to move forward with a 4% rate adjustment instead, which equates to an average of $1.17 per month per residential customer. And a couple notes about the attachment. We have page 121 is just a breakdown of that refuse rate index and shows how the CPI and disposal costs come into play. And then we have pages starting on 122, which is just the specific rates. And I just wanted to note here, the very first page is this year's current rate for Republic Services of Corvallis. The following page is that rate that would go into effect starting January 1st, 2023 for Republic Services of Corvallis. And then we have the exact same thing for Republic Services of Albany, and that's for the area in North Benton County within Albany. So the first page of that would be this year's current rates, and the second page would be the future rate effective January 1st, 2023. We also have Julie Jackson here to communicate other details in the packet if needed. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
All right, thank you so much. And so I see in here that it's not the RRI adjustments do not require any action by the board, but they will go into effect on January 1st, 2023.
Correct.
Okay. Other comments or questions?
Just wanted to say thank you for not increasing the rate, the full amount. I think that was it's a good idea, given the general inflation these days, to be able to moderate that increase.
The rates this year being 4%, the previous rate increase was 4%. And then in 2020 and 2021, it was 3% and 2.9% respectively.
Okay, other comments or questions?
Similar kind of comment. Appreciate hopefully looking beyond the current inflation rate to what hopefully getting back to a more normal and lower rate of inflation. So I think that's a good move on Republic's part to hopefully look ahead a little bit and see fuel prices are, at least gasoline, down significantly in last 4 to 6 weeks, and maybe that will continue.
All right. Well, if there's no other comments or questions, thank you for your report. Anything else you want to share with us?
No, thank you so much.
All right, great. And with that, we will move on to item 7.2, statewide transportation improvement fund review and approval of unanticipated projects of regional significance. And we have Gary Stockoff with us. And I have some other folks listed on the agenda, perhaps joining us online. No?
I believe it is just me.
Okay, perfect. Please take it away.
And in channeling my inner Brad Dillingham, we've referred to these projects as the uppers projects.
Okay.
So, yeah, we're on the uppers. The category and the way that the STIF program is structured is they're all structured as projects. And so when we got through the first session, which was 19 to 21, we had a balance left. And that carried over, which was good. As we got into 21, 23, of course, now we're talking about COVID and we weren't sure what was going to happen. So they programmed the projects based on the revenues that were projected for the 21, 23 biennium. And then just left kind of those unobligated funds as this category here. And then if projects came up after the fact, we could process them through the STIF committee, which we had some last summer that we advanced, and it seems to have worked. So as we move on, we still have a fairly decent balance in that unanticipated projects category project. So the projects that you see before you today are ones that we have subsequently identified to bring forward. Your new STIF committee met on October 26th. And reviewed those and approved those. And those projects are in your packet. I can explain them a little bit greater detail if you need me to, but it kind of shares the wealth as we've tried to do with the committee. So Corvallis Philomath, they're getting a upgrade to their garage for the buses. The Benton area fair moratorium, I'd like to just mention that a little bit. As we have tried to transition more of the administrative things that we should have been doing to our staff from our contractor, the collection of fares was one of those that we transitioned. And our finance team soon said, wow, this is a real challenge to try to figure out and mesh up software and the needs of the community. And so it was decided that since we had the funds, that it might, and we'd been fairless before, that it might be advantageous to go fairless just for the rest of this year, or the rest of this biennium, excuse me. And so that's the $15,000 that you see here. We do not collect much in the way of revenue from fares per year. In fact, the argument is we're not sure we collect enough to cover the staff time to collect it. And what we'll do in between now and then is we will also then take a better, deeper dive into, should we just make this a project for the next biennium, the 23-25 set of STIF projects, which we are working on as we speak. I believe you will see those right after the first of the year, because ODOT has compressed our schedule and wants those by the middle of January. So the new STIF projects are coming. So that's where the fair one is. And then the last one was just helping the COG with the mobility hub and getting those plans done and moving it further along. So those were the three requests. Since this was done on October 26th, we've now added, and I would request a fourth project be advanced using these funds. And I checked with Vance, I can do this. If you had that report up above in the discretionary category, the top project listed was the fleet security fencing for $125,000. And this is for our bat fleet. I love saying that. It's our bat fleet. It's over behind the Sunset Building that we've had some challenges with vandalism. People seem to like to siphon gas. And it really isn't in a tough place. So we came up with an estimate for lighting, fencing, gates, and we were going to apply for a discretionary grant. But there's no guarantee that we will get those because as opposed to the first year of the new monies, and they had more money than what was requested, that has now flipped and we have more requests than we have money. And we felt that we wanted to try to move this forward as soon as we can. So if we could get it funded now, we probably would have this delivered before we even found out if we were successful for the grant funds, let alone work through the process of getting an agreement. So that is a fourth project that we've added. The STIF committee met yesterday and actually approved and is recommending that the fleet security fence also be advanced and made part of this first project request. So with that, I will answer any questions you have.
All right, comments or questions?
Gary, would you refresh my memory and who comprises the STIF committee?
Oh, Commissioner, right after Thanksgiving, you're asking me to think.
Let's in one of our minutes.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Heidi Henry is a new member. Dave Rabinowitz is a new member. Cameo Purcells is a new member. Also Nick Meltzer is on that. We have a city of Corvallis representative. Trying to go around the loop here. Yeah,
That gives me a pretty good.
yeah,
idea.
it's a great group. They really are a good group. And you're going to see, I think, some interesting projects come forward right after the first of the year.
Very operational question for you. So the 125,000 for the fleet.
Do you have your
security
microphone on, Joe?
Question, Gary, for you regarding the fleet security fencing and relative to the 125,000. Does that include card access or how will you keep it secure after hours and still?
It'll be
allowing-
the security kind of gauge that we have like at Avery. So there'll be some kind of system developed. That's why it tends to run a little more expensive. I believe we have estimated on the very high side here. So there's a good chance that we won't need all of this. But with the way construction and supply chain is going, I don't know. So it will have card lock, I'll call it card lock access.
Great, thank you.
Other comments or questions or a motion?
I would move that we approve the unanticipated projects of regional significance. Uppers.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Uppers.
Is that an aye?
Yes.
All right, motion carries. Thank you,
Thank you,
Gary.
commissioners.
All right, next we will move to item 7.3. County Administrator Goals, Board of Commissioners / County Administration Department Goals. I've been told to wait till 11:15, right?
That's correct. I was just
Okay.
going to mention to you that Sean McGuire, who was going to lead this conversation, will not be here until 11:15. If the board would like to go on to other topics, and then we can come back. And if he's not back by the time we're ready to discuss it, we can walk through it quickly. I would just like to clarify that this is regarding our department goals, not about my specific performance goals. Those will be discussed as part of my performance evaluation that will be upcoming on December 13th.
Sure. Okay. So we can move to information sharing and come back to that one. Looks like I'm listed first. So I do have a quick question. We got an email about Deputy Weichel's retirement, and they're asking to confirm that someone is going to present the letter of appreciation. And I'm happy to do that as chair.
I'm also available if needed.
Okay, I do have the time open. And I apologize if I missed an email on that sooner. So. But I'm happy to do that.
Go for it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Let's see, what else would I like to share? I attended the Monroe City Council meeting yesterday and gave a short update on some of the stuff that Benton County's been working on and I feel like I'm busy every minute of the day. So but yeah, nothing seems else to come to mind. So we can move on to the vice chair, Commissioner Malone, if you'd like to share anything with us.
Certainly, a week ago, I attended the fair board meeting, and I think that's Lynn McKee's last fair board meeting.
Oh.
And Jesse Ott will take over, I think, mid-December as interim director. So I think what I mentioned earlier about Joe's vision of combining two small departments to make them more resilient and not so dependent on one individual look like a very good move for us to. And I remember when Joe was talking about that this was not a money saving operation. This would be to make two combine two small departments so they would have more depth, more room for advancement, and I think that vision is serving us well, and kind of sad to see Lynn go. I think she's been there approximately 6 years and has guided at first the fair events center operation, and then in the last 2 years was the head of the combined natural areas and parks and events operation. So time for transition there. Previous week, middle of November, we were all at the AOC annual conference in Eugene, and I thought that was well organized. It was nice to see folks that we don't get to visit with personally on a regular basis. And I think there were some good formal presentations and a lot of good informal conversations that were available at during the conference. But I think that's what I have.
All right, Commissioner Odro.
Thank you. Sorry, I am trying to find something on my calendar and I don't seem to have it there. Which is a little frustrating. I have also been fairly busy with a variety of things, mostly focused on behavioral health and justice system related, that intersection. The biggest change for me as a result of the Association of Oregon Counties meeting was that I won't be co-chair for the Public Safety Committee anymore, because the current leadership has changed all of the leadership and is trying to go in a different direction. So I'll still be very actively engaged in that subcommittee, but won't be leading it any longer. I will be co-presenting or there as a resource for a justice systems improvement meeting for Casa Latinos Unidos. That presentation will be in Spanish. There will be an interpreter so that we can work through and answer any questions for attendees in English and have them interpreted in Spanish on December 3rd. That's a Saturday. Looking forward to that. Should be a good session. Also, we'll be attending the Oregon Business Summit in Portland coming up in a couple of weeks, and the AOC OBI dinner that's that night. I'm not, haven't seen as much hype about that meeting this year, but it's always interesting and an opportunity to meet with our local government officials as well as commissioners from all over and business leaders from around the state. Last, I wanted to mention that I do have on the calendar a date on December 11th to meet out in LC with Commissioner Jacobson. We're hosting a commissioner's corner out at the library. And the sheriff will likely drop by as well. And I think that, and let's see, Senator Anderson will be there as well as Rep. Gomberg. This is was a suggestion of Commissioner Jacobson's. And so she and I put that together with the help of the folks from LC Community Effort, the library staff, and other local leaders at the school district. So I'm looking forward to that, and I will bring back any issues that I hear about. I'm sure, if you do want to drop in, you're welcome. I don't want to overwhelm the local community in terms of having too many, government folks there, and it's their meeting. So, but I think this is a great idea, and I think that we could probably rotate it with different commissioners going out and playing that liaison role over time.
I think that's a fabulous idea. And I've been I'm pondering, how to get more involvement out there. So that's awesome. Yeah, I would love to see future iterations of it.
Commissioner Malone went out and met with the LC Community Effort folks a while back. And so this is just another opportunity for folks to voice their concerns so that we know what's going on in that corner, and doing it jointly with Commissioner Jacobson, because a lot of constituents from the Lincoln County side of the line come over into LC Community for services and to meet their needs too.
Yeah, very good. Any other updates?
Not at the moment.
All right, so we will move. Oh, do you have a comment, Matt?
Yeah, I appreciate the LC effort. There's with the relatively new school superintendent, there's a real opportunity to re-engage the LC community, and there is some renewed effort on grant writing and some projects centered around their library and new roof and solar panels, and so I think it's wise for us to be engaged and pay attention to what's going on there, and obviously not just LC, but that was probably the most difficult one to be engaged with in the past, and I think it's smart to take advantage of the opportunity and the new infusion of effort and projects. And the other thing that I forgot to mention, and maybe we're traders still listening, but appreciate his getting out our 2023 legislative priorities and as a first draft, but I appreciate that effort, and of trying to summarize our efforts. We have a government relations folks that are on board, and I think this will help with our focusing our attention on our efforts, what we want from the upcoming legislature. So appreciate getting this down on paper relatively early in the process so that we can pay attention and pick our spots and see what projects are likely to have legs and how to advance them. So I think this is I think the best organized that we've been as far as speaking with one voice to our legislators.
I want to make a, thank you for that. I want to make a correction, December 10th. LC.
Got it. Saturday, not Sunday.
Yeah.
All right. County Administrator, you are up.
Thank you, Commissioner. Just a couple of quick operational updates while we are on the topic of LC, a couple of things to be aware of. Our city manager meeting that we have this afternoon. We extended an invite to Eddie Provost to participate in that, to represent LC, since they don't have since they're not incorporated and don't have a city manager or town manager. So Eddie Provost will be attending this afternoon in order to give the board an update on projects. Some of those you may already be aware of, others you may not. Thanks to Commissioner Malone for that recommendation a couple of months ago to include Eddie in these quarterly meetings. In addition, I've met with Eddie twice in the last 45 days to talk more specifically about projects of interest and projects that we're looking for assistance on. As a result of that, we have 3 staff members that are involved with ACE LC community effort. One of those is Jesse Ott, and I've plugged Jesse Ott into conversations with Eddie regarding some land that ACE that was donated to ACE, some timberland, and they're interested in gaining insight in how to manage that. And I think Jesse has some expertise that he can help bring. He was going to walk the property with several representatives from OSU as well and try and provide input to ACE. In addition to that, Rick Krager, our CFO, is involved, and he has been helping ACE understand our ARPA funding process. That is a process that ACE is likely to apply for money from the county to assist with one or more of their projects. That process doesn't unfold until the first quarter of next year, but I wanted you to know that Rick Krager is involved in that as well. And then Jen Brown, based on a recent conversation I had with another representative from ACE, is going to be consulting with them regarding some of their solar projects and ideas that they have that I think we may have some ability to help them with. So wanted to make sure you were aware that there are 3 members of our staff, in addition to myself, that are engaged in one fashion or another. Also wanted to share regarding our meeting this afternoon with the city managers, that Steve Martinenko communicated with me this morning, who represents Monroe. He will not be able to be at the meeting today. I would also like to recognize that Lynn McKee will be transitioning out of the organization effective as of December 16th. And I look forward to having the board present something to her at our December 6th meeting. And so we're planning for that. As you know, Jesse Ott will take over the interim director role. I do anticipate that we'll likely have the recruitment out by the end of this week. So we'll begin officially recruiting for the director role, but Jesse is well suited to stepping in, and as you know, is great to work with. So I look forward to working with him in the interim role. As we're talking about transitions, I wanted to mention that our new equity, diversity, and inclusion coordinator is now on board, Sarah Siddiqui. And I'll make sure that all board members have been introduced to her in the next couple of days. She started yesterday. She's really going to go on a listening tour and meet with department directors, board members, other elected officials, and other key stakeholders for the next 30 days. And then from that, we'll be taking the feedback and input and really beginning to craft next steps for that program and what we're aspiring to over the course of the next 2 years. I think actually one last note is we're getting fully engaged in the budget process. And I met with our finance liaison yesterday in addition to Maura, and we'll be working with our individual staff members to craft our current service level is what we're calling it. And that's really the first step for us in the budget process, and wanted you to know that we're beginning to engage in that from our department with finance. So over the course of the next week, I'll be spending time with Maura and others in our department and finance to establish kind of a baseline current service level. And then from there, we'll begin to really build the future budget proposal. So those are a couple of updates for you. I don't believe that Sean will be here until 11:15. If the board wants to have additional conversation, feel free to do that, or we can take a break. Or if you prefer that I bring this topic back and that Sean will be talking out to our meeting next week, we could consider that as well.
Yeah, I'm good with taking a break and just coming back at 11:15. Okay.
Thank you.
Recording stopped. Recording in progress.
Ready to get going? And we are back from our break. Next up on the agenda is County Administrator Goals, Board of Commissioners / County Administration Department Goals. And we have with us Sean McGuire. Welcome.
Also going to be leaning on you, Joe. I know that this is follow-up from a previous meeting from the 8th. Joe is creating our department, our offices, departmental goals for our next biennium. As quick background, all departments are required to identify 3 to 5 goals, one of which has to be related to community resilience and specifically climate action. And so we created the 5 lack of better programs or staffing in the office of the BOC, and then just started to talk about your input on those 5. I believe at the 8th, running behind schedule, didn't get a chance to have a deep dive in this room. Asked for your input. The materials that you provided were mainly from Commissioner Otero. And then I know AOC holidays just kind of got pushed back until today. So I'm talking with Joe. We're looking for your general feedback. Again, big picture items that you feel per topic to be included in the office's departmental goals. Kind of leaning on Joe. Did I miss anything as an overview?
Just sharing that the document that we passed out earlier today, Commissioner, is a document that Sean put together based on input received. Sean and I have not sat down to review this particular document at this point since I was out of the office last week. And but I did want you to know that we will be, Sean and I will be working to take your input that will in turn inform ultimately what we submit as part of it, as it relates to our department goals.
So with that, just we could either go topic by topic or general thoughts that you have to be considered as Joe creates the departmental goals for here, or questions on I've already received, I think all but one department goal. Their draft goals have already been submitted. That due date was last Friday. Again, Joe and I meet on Wednesday, kind of go over those. But either questions on that or your feedback on these 5.
Should we take it piece by piece? Sure. Okay, let's do that.
Okay, so equity is the first, and great to see that Sora started yesterday. It was just great to have that resource in-house again after Johan. So general thoughts.
You already have mine on paper, so
I guess it would help me to understand exactly what feedback you were looking for.
Were there, when we start talking about equity, diversity, inclusion, JSIP, PIO and those things, are there just kind of, hey, we should really be looking at this? Commissioner Ojero, I know that Johan, and then I'm also on the equity committee, the internal equity committee. We've been talking about an assessment and an actual plan. Are there certain things that you think are important, programmatic thing, maybe budgetary expenditures that need to be allocated on these topics? If not, that's fine. But is there something in your head that, oh, we should be thinking about this? Or is it more staffing focused, public focused? Don't forget about this, that kind of approach. Again, very general. Don't forget about, I guess you would call it.
That's great. Thank you. Well, I think the EDI part looks good for me.
Okay.
Commissioner Malone, do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I appreciate the comment about integrating goals with our upcoming budget discussion, so that they're not budgets here and our goals here. And I realize that's a work in progress, and we did some 2 years ago, but I think at this point we're much better able to focus and integrate our budget with our goals. I mean, that just makes sense. They can't be 2 separate entities. They are in some respects separate, but I think integration is a nice phrase to help us move forward.
And I was going to end with that. So I want to get this comment and I'm going to come back to you with an update on a project that I commented on months ago. So did I hear equity is?
I think that's
Okay.
good.
Okay. Jason, I would, in talking with Nick, I think Joe and I, and in our conversations as well, kind of beyond the bond measure. I mean, the bond measure, however that ends up, I think it's, it has a project I can talk about, is going to happen before the budget. So when we, in this and talking to Nick, this is well beyond what can our department, our organization do, regardless of the bond measure, because there's a lot to do. And so I think that that's when that's more specific feedback on this, not just the infrastructure and that, but also what can we do internally from this office perspective to support JSIP and specifically and the general topic.
Sure, go ahead.
I'm sorry.
I would love to address this a little bit because we have kind of a split system. We have kind of the ongoing infrastructure of the Willamette Criminal Justice Council, our local public safety coordinating council under Oregon statute. And the staffing for that is in the DA's office. And then we have Nick as program manager here in the Board of Commissioners office. And coming out of the assessment, a goal of putting together the data and metrics and valuation and a dashboard so that people could see whether or not all of this investment that we're making in the justice system is actually leading to improvements over time. And somehow or another, I still think we need to figure out how to either build synergy between the staffing for the Willamette Criminal Justice Council and the DA's office and what we have, or to co-locate or make that one position or somehow so that we have a kind of a justice system wide person at some staffing level that can continue to monitor the overall program and its effectiveness. And I don't know what that's going to look like, but that's something that I've had on my mind for a while.
I'm thinking about the lobbyists that we are working with and funding. Because I think timing wise, some of those asks are going to be after the bond. And then I guess it's probably obvious, but if and when the bond passes, that we're all ready to go, and get moving on it.
Yeah, the federal lobbying piece will definitely continue after the date of the bond measures. And hopefully the state stuff will be baked in by then.
Commissioner Malone, anything else on JSIP?
Well, just there's a significant facilities component and buildings last a long time, and hopefully we can be thoughtful. I think probably a good model is what we've done on the Calapooya building and LEED certification as part of the picture, so that our buildings reflect our values and goals. Yeah. So that may be bleeding into the next topic, but I think that's important to keep in mind. Just what's our carbon footprint going forward for the next century, or however long we're planning on buildings lasting. But I think maybe like electric vehicles example, more upfront cost, but long-term savings and making sure our buildings fit our goals.
The historic courthouse, it might be something that fits in that bucket. I don't know. Right now, the lead role is being handled by Lynn McKee, who's leaving. So we need to think about who's going to carry that focus forward, and what and a lot will depend on what comes out of that advisory committee work.
Okay, I think we're good on JSIP.
Cool. We have a agendized program. You have, I added electric vehicles on this one as well for your Commissioner Malone, just other topics on our program.
Oh, I would hope that you would continue to be engaged in whatever sustainable materials management plan is developed, or how we intend to work in that space in the future.
Okay, just as a side note, just so you're aware, I know you see me I'm on the Talks Trash Committee and I'm on the SMMP specific subcommittee, and Jen is the alternate on that as well.
Mhm.
Awesome. Anything else under sustainability program, Commissioner Malone?
Well, this is kind of a key to all our efforts. It's not like a separate, it's not really a separate box. It's it should be at the heart of whatever we're doing.
I think I want to go back to a previous conversation we've had too, and that has not been with the two of you as our sustainability program, but we've talked for a long time about what a countywide water initiative would look like. And that's bounced around in terms of staff leadership over time since I've been with the county. I would still like to see something move forward, and it obviously has, it's part of the sustainability portfolio, at least the internal water use questions, but then the external water sharing and water resources picture for the county has not been part of the sustainability portfolio. So I just want to throw that out there, that it's something that is related and that hasn't really found legs in a home.
And Commissioners, just so you know, we're taking notes and we're going to take the information you're providing, and that will inform ultimately what goals we end up with. And, we'll obviously want to make sure what we're achieving or aspiring to, that we can hopefully achieve within this 2-year time frame. So that's kind of the, if you will, the beginning and the end is the next biennium.
And if I might, I don't think I've told either of you, although I have mentioned to Joe a conversation I had on the sidelines at the Association of Oregon Counties with Commissioner Pope of Polk County about water planning. They are doing what we talked about doing and holding a county level water planning process, funding it through their ARPA dollars. They've hired GSI consultants to do that. And of course, one of their major interests is using that water allocation that they have in their water right. So I was very interested in what they're doing, and Commissioner Pope is happy to come down and talk to us, or have their community development staff lead come down and talk to our staff about what they're doing. And it seems to me that if we can somehow work in tandem with them, since we're looking at some of the same water resource, that we'd be better off than trying to do our work after what they've done. So that's a consideration.
Okay, good to know.
Maybe a final thought on this is, and it doesn't just apply to the sustainability program, but making sure that we're developing partnerships, the federal and state lobbying effort, and we can identify what we want to do, but we don't always have the resources to achieve that. And I think it's timely that we have a government relations firm signed up to help us with various projects, but I think this is probably a key one that where there is, especially on the federal level, a significant dollars potentially available, and that we should make every effort to access those funds.
All right. Anything else on the sustainability program? Okay, we can move on to public information.
So just as the way that Joe and I kind of organized it, the first three are kind of more policy issue kind of related. The next two are more, obviously Corey has more than just one topic he's dealing with, but just more or less on staffing and what those, because the next two are more on a staffing kind of perspective here in the BOC. So.
Well, and also in terms of their goals, what are the goals for those portions of the staff?
And that's where getting your input on, there's certain things that you like the hybrid option, these kind of things for our administrative staff are the things that you would like PIO to really focus on. If there is a specific goal for that position.
So an example, commissioners, on this one would be that I have a real interest in us trying to standardize our community engagement process, whether or not that's community engagement that's occurring in, the health department or community engagement happening with JSIP or what have you. And prior to Alyssa leaving, we made a little bit of progress on that, but it's really been parked since, most of this year now. And I would like to get back to that. And I think that would be, that's a goal as an administrator that I think is really critically important. So, I'll be advocating for one like that and drafting one within the PIO areas. So anyway, that might help give you an idea of what might fit into the PIO.
Yes, you have my full support on that.
Mine too. It's something that we've wanted to do for years, and I think that there was some work done in Healthy Communities team to start on that, but it never. It didn't ever get embraced by the whole organization, and I think they made so many assumptions as to how we engage community because of the way they do things that weren't explicitly stated, and so their prescriptions were more on the kind of the details rather than the process. I think we really need it. In some arenas do really well, and in others we just fall flat.
And could you speak to the implement new website trainings for all editors for WordPress goal of up to date and visually data rich website? Like, is this talking about the new county website?
Yes, the new county website will be on WordPress, and it's it's a different tool, and the people are going to have to learn how to use it, and in order to keep it up to date, because a website is only good if it's up to date. And and I would love to see more map-based information and graphical presentation of information, and the kinds of dashboards and things that we're talking about for our greenhouse gas emissions, for justice system. I think we could have metrics for health systems. I just think over time, this is definitely not an overnight thing. We need to have more of a data culture and be able to show trend and show service delivery over time, and use that data both to communicate, but also to develop our own plans for where we need to improve. And right now, our current website doesn't allow us to do that, but yeah.
And Joe, is there anything you'd like to add onto that?
No.
Okay. So that the website definitely has my full support as well.
Well, and I appreciate the thought of trying to standardize our engagement with the public. I go back to budget development several years ago, and each department had a different format and coming into it fairly fresh. That wasn't helpful, because trying to compare things, well, they weren't presented in a fashion that you could do that. So I think to me, this seems like a similar effort to make our, how it looks to the public consistent through our various departments.
To me, it's not only consistency in how it looks, but it's really about making sure that we ask the right questions. You know, who's at the table, who's missing from the table, are we holding meetings only during the day, or are we meeting the folks that really are going to be affected by a particular new process and project? So it's really asking some of the hard questions about the intent of the community engagement, and then how do you reach that intent? And not just have healthy communities do that when they're doing their engagement, but public works as well, community development as well. Yeah.
I think we're good on public information. Is that what I'm hearing? Okay. And administrative activities.
Again, you see Commissioner Ogero's comments. Just looking for feedback on this one as well.
The only thing I added was that perhaps kind of generic support for our legislative agenda. I know that staff will be supporting our legislative breakfasts, whatever they look like this year. And that's not exactly a goal, it's more of a task, but I don't know what else there might be in this arena.
Okay, so just to clarify, so all these comments are the comments that you provided, just yours?
Those are all
Yes.
just mine.
Okay, they're not
No.
from staff, okay.
See, Commissioner Malone and I had a very brief conversation. And during the holidays, I totally get it.
Yeah, you've been on my
Yes.
list for days,
No,
I'm sorry.
No.
I just
That's why we
wasn't,
had this.
I was
Yes,
thinking these
are
were compiled from the departments.
All commissioners. Room.
Okay,
Currently.
got it.
Because we really did not have on the 8th. It was just, I know we were really backtracked, and then we started to get a conversation and we just ran out of time.
Okay.
Commissioner, just to explain a little bit more how we'll refine these. So we brought it back to today's meeting because we were specifically asked to do so. And we incorporated the feedback that we received. We're asking for more feedback today from you. Then Sean and I will work with each program area, if you will, and take what we heard today and refine it down to 1 or 2 goals in each one of those areas. And we will make sure that the person, for example, under sustainability, Sean and Jen and I will sit down, take your input, and then identify the specific goals that we are going to put forward as part of this 2040 process. And then those particular goals will really drive some of the budget decisions that occur as part of our upcoming budget process.
And I think I heard Sean say that staff have also in each of these areas have contributed goals from the bottom up too. So it's not just us.
No.
It's both bottom up and top down.
But just these comments are not comments that are either from one commissioner, they're not
Yes.
Yeah.
from that
Yes.
department saying this is what we'd like
No.
to do. Okay,
This, yeah, this is,
That
the
makes
VOC is its own.
okay. Other comments on administrative activities?
I'm a fan of the hybrid option. Hopefully, some year we'll get we'll fill in the blank spots around the room with new technology that will make John's efforts easier and make that a more viable option going forward. So we do a lot of Benton Lincoln county meetings, and it's great to have some in person, but attendance is better and it's better for the planet to have the hybrid option so we can communicate without having to drive around so much. some driving, but I mean, hybrid's a good phrase that we have both options. And I think at times we ought to emphasize getting together in person just so we have that 3D kind of connection that's I think essential to good communication. But having the virtual option, I think we've been practicing now for a couple of years. And, we're better at it and know what some of the limitations are, but looking forward to maybe having better virtual options where communication is more getting a little more 3D than it is currently. I know there's technology out there. I just have no idea what it is.
That's why I love IT. Other-
So let's see.
Commissioner, there's no action necessary for you at this point, other than just giving us feedback.
Sure. So I'll just apologize for my confusion. I think what would help me in the future, as you're all explaining it, it's coming back, but like you said, we've had a long Thanksgiving and at first I thought we had to narrow these down to 3 to 5 goals, and then I realized I didn't read that correctly. And anyway, when I prepare for meetings, I really focus on what's in the packet, and that's what gets my primary attention.
Yeah.
And so when something's not in the packet, that I don't always remember to go back and look at it. So I think what would help me in the future is if we could,
Get in the packet.
if we can get this, and I know, you're probably waiting on mine, which I admit I did not get to, my apologies. But yeah, and just having like a little blurb of, what the intention is, that would be helpful for me.
You got it. So if I'm sorry, was that it for administrator? Any other comments for that?
Just just feedback on, what's your question? So my statement right there was just moving forward on future
Right.
conversations. Yeah.
Gotcha.
And
Okay.
then so I think we are good on administrative
Okay.
activities perfect. Okay.
So to finalize the 2 quick items, Joe and I will meet and I'll aggregate all these, and Joe to you, and then we'll discuss about this department's 3 to 5 goals. I want to very briefly, if it's okay, just 2 quick things, return to you, Commissioner Malone, and a comment about goals in the budget. This summer, I had shared that I'm working with IT to develop an online tracking system. So far, it's been kind of manual, as in they send me the update. IT now has, they shared with me last week a demo, and it is very slick. It's really nice, and we can actually aggregate expenditures. So you can sit there and say, Benton County is committed this much budgetary expenditures plus staff time to JSIP, to climate, and these kinds of things. So it's very slick. The delay is more or less what Adam is sharing is that they want to do with the new website that you've commented on. And so it's not that they can't do it, it's just why make one wagon that won't fit on the street. And so, but it will be up and running by July 1st. And then second, thank you so much for your patience. I specifically did this meeting in the time warp that is a 5th Tuesday. And we all enjoy when it's a 5th Tuesday, but no good deed goes unpunished. So the holidays get kicked here. So thank you for your patience and understanding about this timing. So thank you.
And actually, can I just go back to administrative
Oh, please.
activities real
Sure.
quick? And I just, I like what Commissioner Ojo wrote for, the availability of records, and as many people have probably heard me say, just, having good minutes for our meetings and having them accessible. And I just think it's really important for the public to be able to access, the documents that they're looking for. And us, when we want to go back and say, why did we make this decision?
That is a huge part of my interest, is being able on any special topic, especially on issues that we only have to deal with every few years, like a solid waste franchise, that we be able to easily go back and say, what was the last discussion? What were the previous decisions? And we can't currently do that with any ease. And I get the glazed look and I don't even know where to find it.
Yeah.
Okay.
So thank you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioners, also why Jen is here, if you haven't seen it yet, and I'm not sure if it's turned on today or not, but when you now walk in our lobby, one of the TVs is reflecting our usage, or not using the proper terms, Jen. so
Generation.
the, from our solar panels. And it is awesome, the work that Jen has done with the company and getting that up and running. So thank you, Jen.
Well, I'll have to go check it out. I always come in the back door, so. Very good. Now, is it being generated by power that we are generating, the TV? Okay, okay.
It's all about power generation on farmers.
Okay.
So that county solar.
So it's not just this facility, it's all of the solar.
It's all of our solar on our building. So we have 5 buildings.
Yeah.
And it's real time or close to real time data.
It is real time. There's a lot of work on the back end to take from all the different companies and aggregate the data. So we get real time QR codes on the ones that are locked that we can access live. You can just see the live site, but everything's aggregated. See, it's quick. It's like 8 slides or something that rotate.
All right. Well, thank you, Sean, for coming today. We appreciate your walking us through this.
Thank you.
All right. Is there anything else for the good of the order? With that, I will adjourn the meeting at 11:49 a.m. Thank you, everyone, and have a great day.
Recording stopped.